So thank you for being here. The purpose of these sessions, what we're trying to do is demystify the filmmaking process and explain what the jobs are for people who might want to come into the industry but think it's not for them, or they don't know people in the industry, or how to get in. So let's start with the basics.
Yes.
What does as a documentary director and filmmaker, what does that job entail? What does it mean?
So I guess it's a factual story that you are making with the real people, rather than, I guess, for a factual drama where you would cast people. I'm casting real people in my films. Beyond that, I think it's very similar to dramas because you're deciding on your elements, and my stories are often retrospectives. So that means, they've already happened and I'm working out a way to tell the tale. And I've often used sometimes recreation, animation I use a lot, and obviously interviews, very in-depth interviews, and lots of archive I've used. So you've got the different elements, you kind of work out what will be the good elements, and sometimes I might have sequences in the here and now. Often when you're sort of, stuff's unfolded and you're kind of working out, where are they now? What happened in the story? And often that's when I might break into the here and now particularly.
Great. And so generally with the film you'd go, there are sort of three phases of the pre-production, the research and pre-production, and the shooting, and then the post-production with the editing. Can you talk us through what a day is like for you before you're shooting? So in pre-production, in research, what does a day look like for you?
So I would, if I thought I wanted to make something like Spacewoman, I was approached to make it, and because it was Eileen Collins, the astronaut, had written a book, I read the book. And instead of thinking, how do I put this book onto the screen, I'm thinking, which points stand out to me? And sometimes they could be like something really small in the book that I can see the whole film might turn on and the whole kind of emotional story. Other times with Coco Chanel, I decided I wanted to make a film about her and the BBC said yes. So then I'm immediately thinking, my first thing often is to think who's alive in the present that actually knew them. Because as much as possible, I want people in the story. So with Spacewoman, I'm thinking, out of all her missions and her family, who are the people that I'm casting? And it's still casting, same as dramas, to be bringing this tale. So that's the research stage. And then for someone like me, once I know I want someone in it, it might be because they're brilliant in archive, and I think I want to find out what they have to say about that story, that they're always in the archive talking to Eileen, say the astronaut, in a conference, and for that, I don't need to talk to that person now, apart from to make them comfortable and say, do you want to do an interview? Because I'm very purist about it. I don't want to pre-interview anyone. I don't want to know exactly what they're going to say. I don't want to get them to say it to me once and then again. I want the first time that they ever tell me everything to be on camera. So my research stage is really short.
Okay. Yeah. And then, so when it comes then to shooting, talk about how you work with other people on your team, the team you have to build around you. Yeah.
So with Spacewoman, there were producers that brought me the story, and so the producer, I'll always go on a shoot with a producer or assistant producer. We'll always do it together. An archive producer is really important to me because we're shaping the story. Sometimes with a documentary, I might do a pre-edit just of the archive. I did with Mary Whitehouse, just because it's like the bones of a tale, and some of the people I might interview might jump out of the archive. So that's one of the first people I'll work with. And then the composer, because for me early on, we were lucky in Spacewoman, we had Marcelo Zarvos, who's a really amazing kind of Hollywood composer. And I'll work with them early on because I want to feel the mood of what we're doing. And then the editor will talk a bit about it and look at some of the materials. So there's like a small team, I'd say, for a documentary, and you work closely together. Yeah.
And do you structure that archive and then think about what you need or what you want to then gather in terms of other interviews? So are you even scoring before you go out and gain other interviews or?
Yeah, so for me, music's really important. So the feel of the film, I'm always like putting things into an album in my Spotify straight away, just as a feel of what I think about it. For the archive, I'm more thinking, what I don't want to say is what someone has to think of the story, but I know kind of what it might be a bit about, you know, and I know, like with Spacewoman, I knew that it would turn on this amazing manoeuvre she did in space. And I also knew that she had a really complicated upbringing that brought a lot of interest to it and surprise. And that I don't need to know exactly how I'm going to make that work through the film. I then know that there might be certain bits of archive that I really want. So with Spacewoman, I just knew that the VHS, the family VHSs were going to be so important. They did lots of camcorder footage, it was the 90s. And so we went into her lockup really early on and got out all these boxes and just started looking at what they were called and transferring tape after tape after tape digitally. And then some of them the editor looked at, and some of them I did, and we all did, and the producer was looking at them, and just working out, you know, things jump out at you, a family call from space. I knew that they'd done a role swap thing in the 80s at flight pilot school, which I thought was brilliant and sounded fun. And it's so important to me, those bits, that it's almost like I won't even commit to doing the film unless I know we can get them. But other times with Coco Chanel, I knew we only had about a couple of minutes of archive of her. There was some stuff when she was really old, and I didn't want to use it because I felt like we're all quite mad when we're 90. And it just didn't seem right. So really I was only a bit of archive of her. So then it's like, okay, what are the key moments in her story and how do we render those? You know, and for me with the Chanel doc, I thought it's this interview she did with her friend that became the book. And that was something that we could do in animation, just reconstruct the whole thing. So that was a starting point. So we were doing those drawings. Sarah McKenemy, who I work with a lot, was doing those paintings really early on. And we knew that we would use, they're real paintings that we kind of cut up, Andy Acorn, who does the animation, and use on screen. It's quite sort of crafty approach, I guess. And that's because, you know, if you haven't got loads of money and you're trying to make a doc, just think about what you want it to feel like and how you can make that happen. And, you know, it doesn't have to be super expensive.
Yeah, that's really interesting though. And so how much are you, what I hear when you're talking about there is that staying alive to the balance of what you've planned and also what offers itself up.
Yeah.
And that your instincts around that spike.
Yes. So you might know that there's lots of interesting stuff happening with the astronaut and her family, and you know you want to talk to them, but then you don't exactly know what those conversations will deliver, and that's great. But you have an idea that there's interesting stuff to explore and what those interesting moments might be. And obviously when you're doing something from a book, I was able to draw on the book. And if Eileen was sort of saying, oh, I'm not sure about, I said, well, you said in the book. So it was like a brilliant research tool as well.
Yeah.
You know, again, for me, without having to pre-interview someone. So when we did the Chanel film, there was a very old model who was in New York, and she'd written the story of her and Chanel in a magazine. And so that was great for me because it meant I didn't need to ask her it all before I went there. I could just talk to her about what we were going to do, and then I could ask her for the first time on camera, which is what I like to do. So for me, there's got to be something in that. I interview someone quite quickly. I don't try to get to know them before I want to get to know them on camera.
Yeah, and how does that work? I mean, your camera operator must be a really key collaborator in setting the right tone, rhythm, space, how you go into somebody. Talk about that, both that dynamic and how you go in and achieve the things, what you do and don't do to get what you need. Yeah,
that's right, because it is, even though obviously I'm not doing drama, it's still a performance on the screen that you're getting someone to deliver. It's just a performance of themselves.
Yeah.
And so for that, you want to have the right atmosphere. So Ian Salvage, who shot that, and Chanel, he's got a lovely manner. He's very relaxing to be with. And the whole crew were. So immediately people are at ease, but you're not pretending it's nothing when you do my kind of film, like a retrospective interview. You know, Eileen's main interview that you'll see in Spacewoman, that was 8 hours long. 1 hour of that was a break. 7 hours was, usually I only do a couple of hours interviews, but that's just how I knew we needed to do that. And that as an astronaut, she'd be able to do that. And I kind of paced it so that the stuff at the end was the end of the mission. So if she seemed quite tired, that was kind of fitting.
Yeah.
So it's like what you're saying to someone is you're making it low key, but they also know this is their moment to tell you their truths, and you don't try to play that down, And I guess I'm quite conversational when I'm interviewing people, because I know I can cut out bits that I'm saying, and then all the obvious things that hopefully people who are trying to make documentaries who are watching this know, which is, sometimes you just do need to pause and let someone carry on and see what they're going to say. But you can wing your way round back to things as well. Like, I'm always really well prepared with the stuff I'll ask about, and I sort of know it off by heart, and I might have a note on my phone of it, but mainly I'll know whether I'm getting the kind of material I need, and then if not, I'll let the interviewee talk about what they want, but then I'll try and wind back round again to the stuff that I need to get their feelings on and their reflections.
Yeah. And so what are the skills to be able to do that for somebody who is going to has an ambition to come into documentary filmmaking? What do you think are the key skills you need as a documentary maker?
You want to be really curious about life, and just, you like to think, how would I tell a story? A good story is something, I think, for a doc, that you could sit across a table in a pub, and in a few sentences, the person you're sitting with, that sounds really interesting, I'm there. That's how it has to feel. And I never second guess anyone else's interest. I'm only doing it because I find it interesting. I don't know how you would second guess whether someone else does.
Yeah.
And then you have to be sometimes you have to be bossy as a director, but not too bossy. You definitely have to be able to connect with people, because what you're really doing is having this connection of an interview that has its own life, really, and you have to be able to go with the flow, but in your mind be sort of editing what's going on, so that you know you've covered, and that's about being really well prepared yourself before you talk to them.
Yeah.
And you have to be creative, I guess, because you're thinking, well, how do I, especially with these stories, sometimes there's not loads of archive, there's not loads to shoot in the present, so you're like, what are the elements I could use? And I think that's quite blended now in terms of docs and drama, that it's very creative. It's a tough time to be in the business, but it's a creative time. So, you want to be that person who's looking at how you'll achieve the storytelling in a creative way, I guess.
And for someone wanting to start out, what would you say if you were wanting to move into the industry now? How would you approach it? What are the best things to be doing?
Yeah, I think it's so different than when I was younger, starting out. It was like you moved through these stages, sometimes in places like the BBC, and you'd be a researcher, assistant producer, and then try to get a break as a director. And I was given a break as a director because they gave us cameras. It was actually Stephen Lambert, Modern Times. I was an AP, and he gave a few of us cameras, and we had to shoot a docu-soap, which was the thing then. And what was great about that, you were in at the deep end, and the people that got the break to direct their own films later were people that were good at filming it, which was right, because it's like, can you frame a shot? Like, you don't need to overcomplicate it. You just want to look down your lens and like, is that what I want to be seeing? That to some extent.
Yeah.
And then you've got to learn the other stuff. So I think now the difference is maybe you have to do that stuff online a bit more and try and do short things yourself, and don't worry too much about what camera you're shooting on. You just want to work with other young people who are trying to start out, and just start making things and see where that takes you. And there's quite a lot of support for the film industry here anyway, so there are little grants you can get. But yeah, now I wouldn't necessarily say that you'd necessarily go through the same route. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense a lot, because also everything's changing so fast.
And also I feel like if I was a young person now, I'd be thinking, well, the world is online. I don't necessarily need a gatekeeper. I don't necessarily need a channel to give me a job, because if I'm confident enough about the kind of thing I want to be doing, I can get together with people, and eventually if something's successful, you might be able to monetize it. So there's lots of ways that you could try to get through now.
Yeah, fantastic. That's an amazing piece of advice to go through. So thank you very much for joining us for Meet the Makers. And everybody go and see Spacewoman.